Hello, I'm Dr Jodie Richardson, and you're listening to Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. If you've been a listener for a while, you will know me as Dr. Jodie Richardson and as a person who really loves a chat. I love talking to my guests. I have the privilege of having conversations every week and being able to share them with you. And one of the things that you may not know about me, but that does grate on my family a little bit sometimes, is that I love talking to people wherever I go. I love people. I love connecting, and that side of me is abundantly clear in today's conversation because my very special guest and I met while waiting to make a coffee at the buffet breakfast at a hotel we were both staying in separately with our own families in Coolangatta a couple of months ago. And we just got chatting, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'd love you to be on my podcast. And I think her husband was equally as surprised as was mine when I sat down and said, hey, guess what? Just met a podcast guest, although he did really say yes. I'm not surprised. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce somebody who I'm really excited for you to hear from, and there's so much that we're going to all take away from today's conversation. I am chatting today with Dr. Kirsten Peterson. Kirsten was a team psychologist at 7 Olympic Games. Yes, 7. She has over 20 years of working behind the scenes with Olympic athletes, with coaches and with teams. And she is a psychological expert in high stress domains like defence, medicine, the legal profession, and also corporate. But one of the things we're going to be talking about today is about what does it mean to be a high performer, and this conversation is going to apply to each and every one of us. So Dr. Kirsten Peterson joining us from Canberra, thank you so much for having this chat with me today.
Oh, Jodie, it's a pleasure, and I love the intro because I, too, am somebody who strikes up conversations, as we both now know, in buffet lines, walking the dog, so you are probably reinforcing a part of me that my husband would prefer to keep under wraps. But nevertheless, it's a pleasure to be here, and I know this will be a great chat.
Oh, I think so too. I know so. And I remember being called out on it before, and I said, it's a feature, not a flaw. And my life is richer, so feel free to borrow that. My life is richer for the people that I get to meet. And I was telling you off air, wasn't I, that I've got another guest I'm hoping for whose dad I met literally waiting for a toasted cheese and tomato sandwich at the airport a couple of days ago. So stay tuned. But Kirsten, you're so experienced and you've got so much to share to this conversation around high performance and stress and anxiety and lifestyle and meaning and purpose and happiness. And that's what we all want. And I know on your website that you love working with people and that we're all the same in the things that we want, but we don't all think about ourselves as performers, do we?
Well, and I invite your listeners to think about this for themselves because we often will go through life living it. But my argument, because I will go into groups and I'll say things like, what comes first, the performance or the performer? Because we often get so caught up in the KPIs or the outcomes that we're trying to get without taking care of ourselves in the process. So, but when I'm asking that question, I say, what comes first, the performance or the performer? And it's reliably like a 3-second beat as people kind of like, put their fingers to their chins and wonder for a moment, and then one timid hand will go up and somebody will say, the performer? And I'll say, are you asking me or are you telling me? and in that, it's just that and then I get to talk to people about the fact that whatever role we are in, whether it's as a parent, a sibling, at work, recreationally, we are performing. I mean, I would equate performing with behaving. So how do we behave? Do we behave in a way that accentuates and enriches our relationships or our work life, or are we actually getting in our own way in some way? And so that is the core of the work I do.
I really like that point of view because even me, when I was thinking about, I get to talk to Kirsten, and I've got so much I want to ask, and thinking about who will this episode relate to, and always wanting every episode to reveal a pearl of wisdom, a little nugget of truth, something that's really inspiring or something to really ponder and think about for every listener, no matter what walk of life a listener is joining us from. And so you're exactly right that we, no matter where we are and at what level we're doing it, and it's so incredible, that you've been an Olympic team psychologist 7 times. I mean, I really want to dig a bit deeper into that too, but I think it's important for us to think about that, no matter who we are and what we're doing and what each day brings for each of us, that we can learn to perform better and to cope better. No doubt everybody's under stress, whether you're a, Olympic champion or a everyday person kind of going about trying to get things done. So your time with us today is really special. Kirsten, we would all love to know more about what it is like to work with Olympic athletes and coaches and teams and actually travel and have that, not only that experience, but also that must be a lot of pressure to be one of the key people that athletes and coaches are leaning on for the kind of support under what's arguably one of the most high stress situations people would find themselves in.
Well, that is a rich and complex question, Jody. Thank you for that.
So welcome.
Where do I want to start? I think, first of all, everybody's human. And there's a great saying, we judge ourselves by our intentions, we judge everybody else by their behavior. And so when you see high performers in action, they seem to be so different from the rest of us. They're not. What I think a great thing to know about Olympic athletes, coaches, teams, they're people who have honed skills to do things in certain environments that, the rest of us can only hope for. A lot of it is about talent, but a lot of it is about sort of how to work in those environments to let your talent shine through. But at the same time, I will say that psychology has not had it easy in the elite sport realm. And it's only been in the last couple of years. We could thank COVID actually and I'm sure you're well aware of this, with the rise of the importance of mental health comes kind of an elevation of psychology as actually something to pay attention to.
Yeah.
But throughout my career, while everybody would say things like, KP, everybody calls me by my initials, KP.
Yeah.
KP, if it comes down to what's in your head that's going to win you an Olympic medal. But let me tell you, when funding cuts happen, the first people to go are, ironically enough, nutrition and the psychologist. Because it's a physical realm, right? So sports med or physiotherapies are, they'll be with a team forever. And it's really been an interesting journey throughout the time I've been in the Olympic world to get psychology valued, because you can't see it. And so there was, and certainly through my career, there have been a lot of well-intentioned but misaligned strategies around the quote-unquote mental game that have actually really infused the work I do now, because we have unintentionally done high performance wrong from a mental perspective for a long time. And I think now we're kind of coming good in that space. But it's not been because, like your comment, like highly valued back seat with the team. Sometimes, sometimes I just had to stay out of the way.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot to be said there. It's not all glamorous, but it was an education for me about how to get better at selling what I do, so people really get it.
It surprises and shocks and disappoints me to hear that it's taken it's taken a global pandemic to really kind of bring the mental health and mindset and thinking side of things to the fore, when really you and I have been in the area of sport and exercise science and performance. I mean, that's sort of a huge part of my undergraduate training for a very long time. And so it's kind of like, really? It took that long? It's huge.
Well, it's not like it's a universal thing. There are certainly people who very much either figured it out themselves or worked really well with me. My graduate school was in the 80s. So we didn't have things like MRIs and brain scanning back then. It was crazy how much the way into our brains has advanced, right?
Yeah.
So that we actually have some evidence that we can point to when we're understanding the mind-body connection a lot better. So I don't want to paint it as all bad, but it was just an interesting piece that when you don't have a lot of evidence of the mental side, you apply physical analogies to the mental side. And so I grew up, my career was hearing coaches and athletes use words like mental toughness. And between you and me and your listeners, I would say that the only times I use the word mental toughness in a sentence is to say I never use the words mental toughness, because I don't believe in that idea that somehow you can tough your way too hard into getting the things done that you need. And that's what breaks people, is when they go too hard in a direction. And so there are ways in which we can work better with our minds and our brains that require less effort and are more sustainable than some of the traditional methods that I see in high-performance domains, such as sport or defense.
I agree with you, and often that approach can backfire in really phenomenal ways, can't it, when people are just being asked to double down and toughen up. And what's the title of your book? I don't want to get it wrong. I'll ask you.
It is, yes. I was going to go there if you weren't, but my book is called When Grit Is Not Enough. When Grit Is Not Enough. And to define grit for listeners who are not familiar with that term, how would you define it? I would define it as just true, unwavering perseverance. How would you would have a better, more accurate definition than me, no doubt. It became popularized by the author Angela Duckworth her book, appropriately titled Grit. Yes. And in it, she defines grit as the combination of passion, something you're deeply interested in, and perseverance. And the idea that people, in her book, which I avoided reading for years because grit just became another word that was weaponized by the sport and defense industry to mean like you're not gritty in the way they could say you were not mentally tough. Yeah. So I avoided it at all costs. And it was only like 3/4 of the way through my book, I was like, shoot, man, what happens if she's already written about what I'm writing? So
better read it.
I read it in a weekend. And let me tell you, your listeners will love it. It's such a great story about what underpins the stories of people who have achieved like long-term goals that required, really nose to the grindstone kind of effort. So she's a great storyteller and has some great theories. Like talent isn't enough, it's about effort, and she really unpacks that. But having read it, I was like, ooh, good. She isn't talking about like this over-gritting stuff that I get, that my world is where people say if a little grit is good, more is better, better. Yeah. And so I emailed her and said, I'd love to chat with you about my side of this. And she actually agreed to an interview, which was gobsmacking. And we had a great chat. And she basically leased over that part of the terrain to me because she's way more interested in helping kids acquire the grit to, do what they want to do in life. So anyway, all that being said, I wrote the book I needed because I am a card-carrying over-gritter, and I needed to find out a different way of living my life. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, it's so good, and it's that classic. We teach what we most need to learn. We make our work from our wounds, which is sort of one, that sort of comes to mind for me. And research is me search. I've collected a few of these along the way as I've chatted to people. And it's, and that's the thing, it's personal to us. And it's you run your own business. I mean, you're obviously a very high achiever yourself. And so it takes a lot of hard work, effort, and, dare I say it, grit. And so I like that you've been able to obviously carve out that space that can become a problem, and that's a resource that can be read by anybody who's in this high performance world, and hopefully find the right balance, if that's an appropriate way to say it. So what's your view on how high performance should be done or shouldn't be done? Start wherever you like.
Well, I've seen awesomeness but also absurdity in my career. I guess I'll start where, and I think it links back to some of the things I've already said, but like I've worked for coaches who have said things to me like, hey, KP, I break them, you fix them. And it was, and again, well-intentioned ignorance about how you build people into high performers. You know, it's kind of the old school military-esque, you know, break them down to build them up kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm, you know, it embarrasses and it shames me that for a portion of my career, a good portion of my career, that's what I did, because you worked for a coach and they tell you to jump, you say how high. And so I was watching athletes, you know, being shamed or being ridiculed or being driven out of fear and anger. And then, you know, they'd come into for me for like rehab, mental rehab, to be able to go out and do this again. And it wasn't until I just knew that this was such an inefficient way to go about doing this. And, you know, it's neuroscience has backed me up, which, you know, I can, you know, in that retrospective way of fitting your reality into things, I can now say, I know I was right, but I didn't have the courage to do anything about it for a long time. But what we do know now is really that in order to do the things that scare us, that maybe inspire us, but we feel are a little beyond us, humans do not operate well under conditions of fear or anger. Uncertainty is hard enough. And so what we want to be able to do is cultivate, you know, if we're talking from a nervous system perspective, when we think about feeling under threat, you know, what happens to our systems? Our muscles tighten up, our breath becomes shorter, anxiety will enter because the uncertainty of threat, versus when we feel safe. And safety is the parasympathetic nervous system. It's the rest and digest. It's the ability to move as freely as possible into that quote unquote threat zone without the threat kicking in. You know, we can call it, we don't even want to call it threat. We call it uncertainty. Now, but you know, like there are times when you are under threat, and I'm not talking about those times, but I am talking about the times when, you know, maybe I am trying to put together a video about a topic I've never talked about, and I'm in an uncertain situation, and I can get really scared about it. Yeah. And that just, you know, think about what fear does to us. It tends to make us curl up or run away or freeze when we want to be able to relax and go with whatever is coming, and knowing, as long as it isn't really threatening. I wouldn't want to try this while skydiving, but you know, you're trying some thing that's a little scary that you can relax into it, your performance goes a lot better. Yes. So that wasn't the best answer ever, but we'll go with it. Yeah, no, it does. It makes sense, because there's this idea that, you know, when we're genuinely under threat, we are in danger. We need to, you know, our body and our brains know what to do. We'll fight, we'll flee, we'll freeze. But yeah, when the brain's alarm goes off, exactly like you were saying, that, and we have the same kind of activity in our nervous system, but if we can have this recognition that, well, actually, I'm actually safe, this is a challenge, or this is uncertain, then it's that paying attention to kind of what is causing the threat and the circumstances we are genuinely in. But it's not that easy, is it? Because we find it hard to think sometimes when we're activated. But I understand exactly what you're saying. To that point, it's unfortunate that our brains really haven't evolved past the time in human history when the threats that faced us would actually step on us or eat us. You know, so those were, but the threats we face in modern day society tend to be much more existential. You know, the job I really want, or the Olympic medal I really want to win. And what I often, you know, in that second scenario, there was a really decorated American diver athlete named Greg Louganis, who, his backstory is fascinating, because he was a closeted gay man at a time when it wasn't okay to be out. And he was also HIV positive. Oh, gosh. And so talk about a burden carried in, but extremely talented diver, was in the Olympics and had the misfortune on a reverse dive, hitting his head on the diving board in one of the qualifying rounds, and came out of that and the whole sub story about now there's blood in the pool and I'm HIV positive and I haven't told anybody.
Oh, my
so carrying
goodness.
that burden around, right?
Gosh.
But he goes into his gold medal winning dive and he nails it. And he wins the gold medal. And afterwards, reporters asked him, "What were you thinking about before you made that dive?" And his response just warms my heart every time I think about it. He said, "I knew no matter what happened to me, my parents would still love me."
Oh, gosh.
And if when we can get down to the realness of the fact that, and I will use that story with Olympic athletes, because really at the end of the day, failure may be your story, but if you are fortunate in life, your parents will still love you. And when we can get to that reality about performance and tone down the expectations by recognizing what's truly important, that's one thing that I might do with somebody who's really jacked themselves up into a state of threat over some perceived outcome's importance. Recognizing that at the end of the day, life will go on.
Your life will go on. As my daughter, my 14-year-old says, the world will keep spinning.
That's exactly right.
Yes, well, I'm thinking this, but tell me if I've got this right. Is it, I want it, but I don't need it? Does it kind of come down to that, or does that play into it? That's obviously very simplistic.
Yeah, and I don't know that many people could get behind saying it like that, but yes, at the essence of it, it is this idea that, like I talk to, I will say to athletes or performers, what I want you to do is zoom out of where you are right now. We're sitting and talking. Let's zoom up 20 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet until we're like dots on the earth. And to get that kind of perspective on whatever it is that we've got our knickers in a twist about, that it, in the grand scheme of things, yep, it matters. But does it matter so much? Because what we're trying to do is reduce the threat, reduce the bigness, so that the natural talent that you have, the work that you've put in, can be brought to bear with the least resistance possible. So whether it's sort of zooming out, or like you say, it's, I want it, but I don't need it. But you can hear people going, but I still want it.
And I really need it too.
Yeah. So it's a hard one to get to, but that's part of the work that I do with high performers to help them get the perspective, because all we want to be able to do is bring what we already have in us. I'm not asking you to do anything that you can't already do. So the first thing with an athlete or performer is like, can you do it? Can you do this thing? Have you done it before? Usually it's a replicated thing, or do you, is it in the realm of possibility that you can do it? Okay, good. Now all we want to do is bring as much of that in you to that performance, and at the end of the day, we can walk away going, I've given myself the permission to do that and gotten out of my own way.
What are some of the thinking skills that the zooming out is so powerful, and sometimes instances in our life can help us get that perspective that we need. Listeners who've been listening recently or received my newsletter will know that I recently lost a dear aunt, my mum's beautiful sister, and it really kind of shines a spotlight on what really matters. In reading something recently, a really interesting book, it said somebody was talking about a similar set of circumstances, but said the illumination doesn't last. And I thought that is really powerful, because we can have these moments in time, can't we, where we can kind of really focus on what matters and have that kind of bigger picture perspective, but it fades. And so what are some of the other thinking skills? So anyone listening who thinks, right, well, I'm not an Olympic diver. Some listeners may be very, very high-performing athletes, but I have expectations on myself, or other people have expectations on me, and I get in my head, I get stressed, I get anxious. What other thinking skills might be helpful?
Well, one that comes to mind that I think is domain agnostic and that anybody can do it is to really, and I have people like take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, and just put down what is my job in this moment and what is not my job. And this works very well for, say, an Olympic rower who is going up to the Olympic final. And so, okay, so tell me your job. Oh, you've got to win. No, that's not your job. That will take care of itself. What is your job? So meaning, what is the task in this moment? And this gets back to the kind of things you already know how to do. So if it's researching a paper, or if it's having the discussion with your daughter, what is my job here? I need to stay calm, or whatever. You really list out the behaviors that you want to bring to bear on whatever this task is.
Yeah.
So Olympic rower, the start. They have to push off with their feet. Their legs go down. They bring the oars in, and they do that as efficiently as they can for the first 10 strokes. ... If and that's your job. And then equally, what's not your job? Well, the weather. If I do something and I make a mistake, and I'm not going to worry about it, I just need to correct it as fast as possible. And we list out the things that we don't necessarily want to be having our attention to, which in a world filled with anxiety often starts out with, what if this goes wrong? What if something horrible happens? The what ifs.
Yes.
And so what I will say to that, which is getting off the job part, but if that doubt is allowed to exist, and that what I encourage athletes and performers to do is answer the damn question. So what if I screw up the start? I'm going to then take the next 5 strokes to really make it better. What if I make a mistake and my daughter starts to cry? I give her a hug, and I say, let's come back when you're calm. We go through. We don't let what ifs rule without answering those questions. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes perfect sense. Yes.
So those are 2 strategies. One is really focusing on I'll go back to the job thing, where if you just focus on that piece and recognize when the other stuff inevitably comes in, the what ifs, or, damn the weather, or whatever it is, or that early deadline on my project is so unfair, come back to the job itself. So it gives you something to focus on away from the stuff that tends to distract us and makes us more upset.
And that's about that control of our attention, isn't it? Shifting that spotlight of our attention. Is mindfulness and kind of training the attentional spotlight, that's how I often refer to it. I expect that that's a part of the work that you do with performers, high performers. Yes.
Yeah. Well, so mindfulness came into vogue while I was still working, actually, at the AIS, the Australian Institute of Sport, and I taught athletes how to meditate, which is the practice of mindfulness, for a couple of years before the weight of the hypocrisy weighed upon me. And I started to meditate myself because I thought, I can't be teaching something that I don't do.
Yes.
And honestly, Jody, it has changed my life. I do see, and we invested lots of money in a lot of different kind of neurofeedback training. And I will say that mindfulness training through meditation is the biggest bang for anybody's buck. There's a lot I could say. I've now become a meditation teacher as a result of this, the importance of this idea that you say that meditation is, among many other things, a way to train your attention.
Tell us about the neurofeedback as well. I'm fascinated about kind of, listeners will probably be curious, what exactly did you measure and what did you find?
Well, I wasn't a scientist, but we used neurofeedback technology. What you can do is through exercise, you get different formulations get placed on your head. Now, it can be anything from sensors, and if you're really going to a neurofeedback expert, they actually put sensors right on your head, but there's like different kind of headgear that you can wear that you're watching a monitor and doing certain tasks, and it will give you feedback as you are doing things. It will tell you what your brain is doing, and you over time and with conditioning learn how to actually change the brainwave activity in your head to achieve certain outcomes. And it's been a few years since I've done it, so I am so far not an expert, but I can put you on to people if you'd like, where you're actually learning to retrain your brain. But the problem with that technology, as we discovered at the AIS, is no athlete is willing to sit on a neurofeedback machine for an hour to get that kind of training. It's just not conducive to an active athlete's lifestyle.
Right.
So if you can't get people to do it, it's not worth the money you spent on it. Whereas meditation is infinitely portable.
Yes.
And there's and lots of ways to do it. But I would say clearly that attention is the currency of performance, in the sense, to your point, that what we attend to is what everything else flows from that. So when you think about the jobs that I was describing, what's your job, what's not your job, the more you can spend time focusing on your job, the more likely you're going to get the performance that you want.
Yes.
Now, that's not counting for all the physical things that could go wrong, or, you could break a leg, and I don't care, all the mental attention isn't going to help you.
Yeah.
It's a misnomer, for example, that you can just not think about something. We are, our brains, our minds are thinking machines. They say 90,000 thoughts a day. It's crazy. So it's about focusing toward what, and learning through meditation or some kind of attentional technique to sustain your attention where you want it more often is going to be a great performance enhancer. But unfortunately, too, our modern technology, the phone I am talking to right now, is an attention-grabbing machine, right? We don't tolerate boredom. We don't tolerate just sitting in space and not thinking about things.
Daydreaming.
Whatever. So we are actually detraining our attention every day. And so these techniques are really important.
They really are. I'm very aware of it. I try very hard in times when I am waiting not to go on my phone. And I'm one of the few, if not the only one. And my mind says, pull out your phone. But I am resisting that because I am really conscious of the fact that it's really nice for our brains just to have a little rest.
Absolutely.
And to not be, taking on board more information. And so much of, if you go on your phone, you check your emails, it's usually nothing fun and exciting happening there. You go on Instagram or you go on social media or somewhere else, and comparisonitis can jump in, and
it's actually not healthy.
No.
Depending on what we're looking at.
That's it. Yeah, that's right.
Well, there's a very eminent meditation teacher named Joseph Goldstein once said, and I love this quote: "Boredom means you're not paying attention enough." And the idea that we want to lean into, what does boredom actually mean? And so when you're standing in line, in the grocery line, and it occurs to you, I'm bored, and you might not even have that conscious thought.
Yeah.
But there's something in you that thinks this is not entertaining enough.
Yes.
And that's all of a sudden the phone is there. And it's really like these are subconscious choices that we are making.
Yeah.
When we can actually tune in to what my senses are telling me right now, even in the grocery line. Like, what am I seeing right now? What am I hearing? Can I feel the floor under my feet? And just like having a dance amongst your senses, because your senses are the portals, I like to say, this is very pretentious, the portals to the present. And the more we can just, enrich our experience of the present simply by observing with curiosity is a way to kind of cultivate that muscle. And again, is because if we think, don't look at the phone, don't look at the phone, don't look at the phone, the last thing we've said to ourselves is phone. But instead, it's really getting curious as a mechanism. And it is interesting.
Yes.
What it's like to just be here and notice the colors.
It is, and I pretentious or not, I disagree. I love it. Our senses are our portals to the present. And I use the expression, we've got to get out of our head and into our body, out of our mind and into our body. And
there you go.
I recently interviewed Dr. Jenny Brockis, who wrote a book called The Natural Advantage. And so she really highlighted for me how much time we spend inside, how much little time we are exposing ourselves to nature, be that near the water or near greenery. And so I'm trying to use those times when I can to pay attention to kind of just what nature's offering around me and the sounds and the like. But it's, I think, our time and attention is so precious, and, we we have control over those. We have control over those, and we can train that, like you say, and that really is the currency of high performance, as you said before. And you're so quotable. I'm loving it.
The thing about nature too that somebody wiser than me once said, is that you never look at a tree and think, you're not tree enough for me. Like, we love nature for its imperfections as well as its perfections. And it's so healing in that way too, because like you said, Instagram and comparisonitis, are you ever out there looking at one tree and going, I wish you were more like that other tree? And it really reorients our sort of perspective on what's okay, what's enough.
Yes.
And I think so, in addition to everything you've said, and I agree with every bit of it, it's also just such a great way to step off some of the treadmill that we get on when we're on our phones or doing all the crap that we do to make ourselves feel awful.
Totally. KP, I want to ask you, I've seen you, I've read a lot of what you've written, and one of the things that you have said is that sustainable high performance is easier and harder than it might seem. And I'd love for you to elaborate on that for us, please, because sustained high performance just feels like it's hard. So help us, throw us a bone here.
Well, and it is kind of funny when we say high performance, it implies some pinnacle event, like crossing the finish line, in that moment of utter agony and success. But I think of high performance is performing to your potential in that moment. So like it can be a cruisy thing, and to use sport as an analogy, a lot of what looks hard to the rest of us is actually very automatic behavior on the part of athletes, and they just learned it over and over again.
Yeah.
But in our regular lives, what I would say, and this is where I take a page away from, say, grit, because grit implies that passion and perseverance, and the more little perseverance is good, more is better. Somehow there's more of it, and you get a grindy feel to that. Like you got to keep going more. And certainly in the sport world, I'm going to use a quote that I use in my book. The author David Foster Wallace tells this story about two goldfish swimming along and perfectly wonderful in the fish tank, and then a bigger fish comes by and says, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And they keep swimming along, and the two little fish, one looks at the other and says, "What the hell is water?" and I use it as a metaphor or analogy, whatever that is. In sport, grit is in the water. Grit is everywhere. It's constantly people athletes looking at other athletes saying, if you're going to do that, I'm going to do that plus 10%. And then somebody else is 20%. And it's always that grindy thing to get better, because you want to be up later than everybody else, because that's how you're going to get your competitive advantage.
Yeah.
So all this is to say, this is what the kind of the cultural conditioning I think a lot of us buy into, that it's got to be harder and harder and harder, and that's how we do it right. But what the meditative and Buddhist psychology traditions would talk to us about is this idea of what's the minimal effort required. And often it's a quieting of the mind to really discover, in my view, what appropriate effort is. And that we don't, I know it sounds so trite. It's like, less sometimes is better.
Yeah.
But it's also getting out of our heads around the idea that it's supposed to feel hard. That I want to be able to go in with, what is it that I need to do to get the job done to the level in which it's okay enough, and it's okay not to kill myself doing it.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of minimal effort, not maximal effort.
Especially like you say about sustainable performance, because it's a long game. Any type of elite athlete is playing a long game, and it takes a long time to learn the skills and for those to become automated and then to ultimately work towards. I mean, look, what would be the time span between somebody who goes, "Hey, I'm pretty all right at swimming to competing at the Olympics, it's got to be 10 years, doesn't it, at least?
That's conventional wisdom says it's a 10-year journey, although I think there's wrinkles, based on talent and
totally.
things like that.
But
I guess the other wrinkle to this too is this idea of, and you see this in sport played out really well. Like when I started in sport, there was when athletes would train too hard and injure themselves or get into what we might call a chronic fatigue syndrome space, it was called overtraining. Like you've trained harder than your body can sustain, and the telltale signs are resting heart rate is elevated, and suddenly you get tired a lot easier. You can't put in efforts for a long period of time. So when I was first a sports psychologist, when we had athletes hit those ceilings because they've overgridded, you'd have to tell them to back off. And no athlete who made their money on, doing it harder ever liked or wanted to this idea of backing off. But then around, 6 or 7 years in, the idea of recovery came into vogue. And ever since then, every training center that's worth its salt has a recovery center built in. The science of hard effort and then taking the time to recover from that effort came into vogue. And all of a sudden, we went from calling that syndrome that we used to call overtraining, now we call it under recovery. And now you can talk to athletes about, hey, you need to recover harder. And that appeals to that, all right, if I got to do something, it's going to be more of it. And all of a sudden now we're talking about the modalities of recovery. So when I think about sustainable performance, it's also building in the idea that recovery is not just for weak people. It's for smart people.
It is. It really is. I'm so pleased that you are making this point and making it so strongly. And when you talk about recovery, for the listener who is not the Olympic athlete and but is kind of really working hard, whether that's it's professionally, as a parent, as a weekend warrior, or just juggling all the things, and so the training, I say kind of in quotation marks, is kind of a mix of a whole lot of things, but recovery is necessary. What sort of things can we do? And I've got some things that I love to do for recovery, but what would you recommend in terms of like active recovery for listeners who think, well, I rest, I'll put on Netflix, that's resting and recovery are different. So tell us more.
Yeah, well, I will first say that I really dug deep into this earlier this year because I needed it. And I realized that there's a bunch of stuff out there on sleep, like how to get better sleep. That seems to be the drumbeat. And so getting better sleep is, of course, sort of a baseline to be able to perform more sustainably. But the thing about sleep is it's not voluntary. You can increase the quality of it, but at some point, even insomniacs pass out. This thing about rest and recovery, it's entirely voluntary. You can go without it. So I just want to make the point that it's harder. And I discovered that I was seeing it like from an athlete perspective. You have a hard training effort, then you stop and you get into the cold plunge, or you do something there, and then you go back to another hard effort. And it's like you see the hard efforts is sort of like the foreground and the recovery is the background. But what does that mean for us? And so I guess I just want to double down on this is not as easy as, and I again, this is the lesson I needed to learn. And so, because what I was doing was leaving my desk, because I'm a computer, I write a lot and I'm on Zooms a lot, and I'll go into the dining room and then pick up my other laptop and read the New York Times. It's like, whoa, I'm sitting and I'm just amping up my news feed anxiety. So it is, it is the trope around, and I say trope meaning like we know this, that we should not sit for long periods of time. And so having mechanisms to at least, I have a stand-up desk now, so I'll put it up and down. But I will also do the stuff that you and I talked about earlier, which is actually leaving the house, walking outside, like doing something different is really important. So I think it's, think about what is it that I just was doing, and I want to give my mind a break. What would be, so it could be, like nature is such an important thing. It might be art or music if those are your proclivities. But I would say you need to be moving. You know, so the antithesis of not moving is moving.
Yes, yes.
So those are some things that come to mind for me. But I'd love to hear what your go-tos are.
Oh, I've recently been. My friend Selena and I have been trying different experiences at the Recovery Lab, which is down in Mornington, which is on the Mornington Peninsula here in Victoria, and we've been doing compression boots. We've been doing infrared sauna, cold plunge, which I'll tell you a funny story. We thought we were superheroes. Like we're, both, middle-aged women. We love our exercise. We're really, passionate about our work. And we're like, yeah, we can do cold plunge and we're going to get on the 8-minute board. We're going to be in this cold plunge for 8 minutes. We're going to get our photo taken. We're going to get on that board because we're obviously both very competitive. Anyway,
Isn't it great? Recovery becomes competitive.
Oh my gosh,
that's
so
another story
wrong.
for another day. But go on.
Totally. Yes, and so we stayed in for about 9 or 10 minutes and we were like, what is all the fuss about? I mean, come on. Anyway, then we realised that the temperature of the cold plunge wasn't as cold as it typically is. I can't remember. It was like 9 or 10 degrees or something, which is still pretty chilly. When we came back the next time and it was like 5 or 6 degrees, it was painful. Like I literally could not physically stay in. I was in for about 20 seconds. It was so painful. I hopped out. I went in the warm contrast, and then I did it again, and I set myself up for it. And I was managing to stay in for 90 seconds, but we laughed and laughed because we thought we were heroes, and we're like hero to zero.
Well, so yeah, the true story for me. I told you about athletes who didn't necessarily want to talk with me as a sports psychologist.
Yeah.
The way I worked with the boxing team before the 2008 Olympics, and so what I would do, and when the boxers were done with their workouts, they'd go into the cold plunges, the cold baths, and I would get in the adjacent one, and we'd have our consults because they were trapped there, and they had to stay in longer than me. Because I'm like, 20 years older than them at that point, and like they can't let a girl beat them. So these were the lengths I went to have chats with athletes who might not have otherwise been up for it. So,
yeah, and
but I love that. Trying out different modalities, and there's so much good science around the importance of these temperature shifts for helping our bodies recover. So that's awesome.
It's been good. And the other thing is NewCalm. Are you familiar with NewCalm?
No.
So NewCalm experience where you're essentially in a recliner with a weighted blanket, blackout goggles, headphones, and the music is, it's like, I think it's called binaural beats or...
Yeah. I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
Very calming for the nervous system and very relaxing. And so we've been kind of trialing all of these different experiences. And look, I was very, very stressed recently. I just was feeling a bit overwhelmed, and I've been to CrossFit, which is my, choice of exercise. And my whole family was out, and I thought, what, I'm going to just go to spend some time in the compression boots, just to have a little bit of time out, to sit, to read a magazine, to unwind, and just take a little bit of time for me. And it was just what I needed. So, obviously that costs money, and it doesn't have to, but I really love that we've come to this idea of, when it comes to, we can't be on all the time, and what can we do that really supports us in whatever it is that we're working towards, and you've talked to us about sleep, about getting outside, about really understanding that we can only sustain our high performance if we build recovery in. It's equally as important as all the training, so to speak, isn't it?
You can't have one without the other. It's grit is good until it's bad. So you find that the sweet spot of what we're talking about. So effort without recovery is just unsustainable. So how do we? And I guess the other thing I was going to say that it occurred to me as you were talking is the importance of social recovery. And by that, I don't just mean like if you have a job with lots of people and you're an introvert, you absolutely will need to take time away because your personality is not geared for so much social interaction. But it's also recognizing, who are the people that sort of fill your cup versus empty your cup, and that we sometimes need to be very attentive to modulating perhaps the obligatory relationships that really exhaust us. Even though women in particular, I would say, are kind of yes people in that regard, that you have to be a good hostess or, a good family member. And sometimes it's, we need to be able to titrate some of those things, and making sure that we do spend time with the people who fill our cups. Now, it sounds like you and your friend, for example, are good cup fillers for each other. But that is such an important piece because we are social animals, and we could go on a whole nother piece of this and what COVID has done to sort of inadvertently teach us about the importance of social connection, but it has to be the right ones to really be good for our recovery. Really
good advice. Well said. The very last question, what would you say to somebody who is really critical of themselves when they have underperformed in their mind? And it could be the teenager who's coming off the football field and just really feeling and in their head about, I just didn't play well, I should have done better, I should have done this. Or the person that leaves the boardroom is like, darn it, I didn't share everything I was meant to say, and I didn't respond in the ways I wished I had. These kind of self-critical kind of thinking or thoughts that come through after we've not performed at our best. I know this is not an easy answer, but
especially
just in 90 seconds or less. No, what would you say? What would you recommend?
First of all, I want to say that we have been massively culturally conditioned to believe that being hard on ourselves is the way to get ahead. And I think we come by it honestly. Having said that, however, what I would talk to people in this space around is this notion that after a performance where you didn't get everything done that you wanted, I want you to think about the morning of the performance, and did you set out to really screw up that meeting? Did you set out to miss the penalty kick? Was it your plan? Because things happen to us and we did not intend them. And so the first thing that has just happened to us is something we did not intend. So the Buddhists would call that the first arrow. The arrow of misfortune has hit us.
Yes.
Now, that is something we can't avoid because we care. We went in with the best intentions to perform well. So ouch, right? Ow, that hurt. But what we do through our cultural conditioning is we then shoot ourselves with the Buddhists would say a second arrow, but I would argue we often will shoot ourselves with 47 of them, because then we will judge our performance as if we had done it on purpose.
Yeah.
When in fact, something happened, right? We just didn't perform. And so in that situation where it's tempting to shoot yourself with 47 arrows, I'm going to first say, what a waste of time. Because you're just hurting yourself over and over again. And this is the thing, the counterintuitive truth here is that self-compassion is the fastest route to resilience, not self-flagellation. And so what we need to be doing in those moments is what we would do if somebody we loved a lot had gone through what we just went through. So if you just missed the penalty kick, your best friend just missed the penalty kick, would you be telling them they're an effing asshole for missing it and they're stupid and that was ridiculous? No. If you truly loved them, you would be giving them a hug and saying, oh, man, that was hard to watch. I'm sure that's really hard. And so we offer ourselves words of compassion. And my go-to is like, whew, that wasn't how I planned it to go. That's tough. And just acknowledging the pain of what just happened with an aura of kindness. And I know I went way over my 90-second mark on that, but it's so important that we understand this counterintuitive truth that kindness gets us so much farther and gets us on our feet much faster.
Yeah.
But that's the biggest performance gap I see in Western society today is that we don't back ourselves. We are not our own best friends when things get tough, and we need to be.
Thank you. I really approve of you taking a little bit of extra time. I think that was most reasonable and a really beautiful answer. I jest, but it is, and I did interview Dr. Kirsten Neff, another Dr. K.
Did you?
Yes, I did.
She's my queen.
She is amazing, and the science around the science around self-compassion and the benefits across so many domains is just profound. So I love that you've shared that, and it is a real reminder for us all, and our listeners can go back to that episode because she actually shared a beautiful self-compassion practice that we can all put on repeat. And so KP, gosh, I would love to keep chatting. Time is not on our side.
You have a life to live.
Yes, and I'm grateful for all the time you've generously shared with us today. How can people work with you and find you online and learn more about you? And I do believe you've got a masterclass coming up, haven't you?
Oh, thank you for that, Jody. That was a very nice plug. Yes, indeed.
Pleasure.
So, yes, I'll be running a free masterclass Wednesday, 27th at noon on LinkedIn, and it's called Make the Most of Your High Performance Moments. And I'd love for anybody interested to learn more about how they can do that to join me next Wednesday. It's also, my website is drkirstenpeterson.com, so DrKirstenPeterson. And you can find me there, and you can find information about the masterclass and about other things that I do, and my book's for sale on Amazon.
Fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. Oh, KP, hey, it's so great to be connected, and thank you for joining us and sharing, so much of kind of what you've been, you've shared a lot with us, just the tip of the iceberg for your expertise, but we're very grateful. It's really been very meaningful, and I'm grateful for your time. So thank you.
Jody, it is this is my mission, is to get some of these messages out into the world, and so you have served. You have done me a solid, and so however I can repay the favor, I'm all yours.
Oh, that's so lovely. Oh, thank you so much. Thanks again, KP. And
take care.
Thank you. And thank you for listening. Gosh, what a great chat. Oh, so many more questions that I'll hold on to for next time. But if you've got questions that come to mind too, please join me over on Instagram. Let's just discuss them and chat and see what we can come up with, and share your feedback too, please. And I am on a mission to 100 reviews on Apple. So please, if you haven't written a review, if you've gained some insights, some pearls of wisdom, some inspiration, or you just feel less alone on your journey through this life, and you'd like to drop me a quick note on Apple and you'd like to drop a quick review on Apple, that would be amazing. I think we're up to 92. So let's see if we can get there. All right. Thanks again for your time, and I will be back again with you next week. Okay. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr. Jody Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodyricardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.